Welcome back, everyone. It's that time. It's time for another episode of Interventions and Detentions. And I'm your host, Brad. And I'm coming at you solo this week on my own at the table and the microphone with a topic that's kind of a general topic, I guess. It's not going to be anything mind-blowing or groundbreaking, but I want to spend some time talking about behavior, relationships, and how that relates to kids and what really works in schools and maybe some things that really don't. And I'll tell you, this is not going to be about the magic bullet, the silver bullet. If you're looking for the answer to fix all your kid problems in school, this is not going to be it. It's really going to be more about one simple thing and how you can maybe do that in a school to lower your behaviors, lower your incidents, things like that. And to me, it's relationships, and it's always been about relationships. You know, every educator has that one kid, the one who changes how they see behavior forever. And I don't know that I just have one. I mean, I've been in this game now, like I said, for over 20, 25 years, you know, between being a teacher, being an administrator. I've had lots of kids. I don't even know that I could begin counting the kids that have, been a part of my life. And I always call them my kids. You heard Sherry refer to that. Your kids, your kids. So I've had several, and I'm going to refer to some of them specifically in this episode. But I've had lots of kids that have shaped not only how I think about behavior and how to deal with kids, but, hopefully I've shaped them as well. One thing I pride myself on, with relationships is just lasting relationships. There's a lot of students that I've been in contact with through the years that I remain in contact, and now they're adults. And what's really cool is when those kids that you've either had in the classroom or had in your building, and now they have kids in your building. That's really cool. I actually have a couple right now who were my kids at a different district, and now they're in the district that I'm principal in, and their kids go to my building. And, it's fun because I can share stories about their parents, both good and bad, but it helps build that next generation of relationships with kids. So, this episode is going to be all about what can help work in schools. I wouldn't say it actually works. It just depends on who's delivering it. When it comes to student behavior, relationships, and just building connections with kids, it doesn't even have to be kids. It could be kids, adults, staff members, parents. It's all about relationships. If you don't have that foundational relationship established and built with kids, parents, teachers, you don't have anything, in my opinion. That is the root of it. That's where it starts. You can tell I'm passionate about it. I'm a relationship guy. It's one of my 5 top strengths, according to Gallup polls, that is. Relationship builder, just wanting good relationships. I think I feed off of that. If I don't have a relationship with somebody, I don't have anything. I need that relationship, and it's a two-way street. So we're going to dive into things today and just kind of see where this goes. I'm not really sure. I've always been focused on, getting to know students, getting to know parents, their families, their interests. It's all about, building those relationships and knowing what is going on inside the kid and where they come from, their neighbors, their family, their loves, their hobbies. You got to have that perspective in order to better understand the child and the decisions that they might make, sometimes both good and bad. And that, I would say it evolved for me a little bit, going from teacher to administrator, but I've always, again, been about the relationships, and that has not changed. Maybe just how I go about building those relationships, between teacher and principal look a little bit different sometimes, but nobody told me how to do that. I think that's just who I am. And so when I hear stories from the battlefields of education and hear about administrators who are just about the consequence or really focused on cleaning up behaviors in their building, I don't know that those people are really focused on getting to know kids, getting to restorative practices, building relationships, getting to know what's going on inside the kid that made them choose the thing that they did, and how do we get them to choose what we want them to choose and what we want them to do. So again, that's kind of where we're going today. Behavior is not just about discipline. It's about understanding and that connection that you build. It's also about restoring good behavior. We're going to talk a little bit about restorative practices in this episode as well. So we got a lot of things to talk about today. A long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound. Just watch Old Bandit run. Little trivia there for you. Name the movie. All right, let's dive into this. I want to give you some ideas and maybe some interventions, because this is interventions and detentions. We're going to talk about both of those today, actually, and what works and what doesn't work. Consistency is obviously what helps make a difference in your building. If you're jumping from intervention to intervention or strategy to strategy, sometimes you have to do that from kid to kid as well, but you got to have some consistency too, because kids are going to feed off that. They know if this doesn't work and you try it again and again and again, I think that's the definition of insanity, isn't it? They're going to feed off of that, and they're going to keep making the choices that they make and get away with it. So think about how you can build consistent procedures, expectations across your building, and then deliver that message on a daily basis. I'm going to highlight a couple strategies here. Some things that I've used that are very simple. I like the results I get. Do they work every single time with every single kid? Heck no. But do they work the majority of the time? Yes. One simple one is, again, this is not going to be anything that is mind-blowing, folks. You probably are already doing some of these things. And if you're not, hopefully you'll glean something from it. But for a lot of students, even at the primary level, we use a check-in and check-out system, a simple check-in, check-out, where we are focused on, changing behavior of a student, whether it's being disrespectful to adults, being disrespectful to kids, not getting homework done, whatever it is, whatever that behavior is that we want to change or focus on, we develop a plan and set some goals with students, and then we have them check in with a different adult that they probably wouldn't normally see on a consistent basis during the day. It could be the janitor. It could be the nurse. It could be another classroom teacher down a different hallway. It could be an instructional assistant. It could be the librarian, the gym teacher, whoever. Somebody that they can go to and spend some time with at the beginning of the day, where they check in and they talk about goal setting. They talk about that behavior that we want to change and how we can prevent that behavior from happening today, things to do in substitute of that behavior, how to turn that behavior around, whatever it is, the pep talk that they need to start their day, to check in. And then at the end of the day, they check out. Now, sometimes through this process, they'll have a point sheet. We're going to talk about that next in a minute. They may not have a point sheet. It might just be a simple conversation at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, where they're checking in and then again checking out with that same adult to let that adult talk to them about, hey, how was your day? Did you make XYZ choice? And if you did, what was the consequence? Or if you didn't, what did you do instead today? And, give them that pep talk and that attaboy and pat them on the back. And if they did, they did falter. It happens. We all make mistakes. How did they respond to that? How did they turn it around? And just those conversations that those other adults that are checking in and checking out with those students can go such a long way to restorative practices with that kid, to let them know they've got somebody in their corner that they can talk to who's not their classroom teacher harping at them or Mr. T giving out consequences. It's somebody that they can build trust with, build relationship with, and talk about the behavior specifically and how they can work on it and fix it over time. It doesn't just happen in one day, folks. That's the downside of it. But it can make some positive change in the kids. We talked about behavior sheets that could accompany the check-in and check-out. Behavior sheets can also just be something on their own. So a lot of times when teachers are just super frustrated over behaviors, this kid just won't do what I need him to do, and he's constantly under the seats, or he's on the tables, or he'll come back for 5 minutes and then he's back at it again. And one thing that I'll suggest right away is, have we looked at a point sheet? And a point sheet, it does make more work for the classroom teacher, but we try to keep it simple and manageable at the same time. We want to, again, pick a behavior or two. We don't want to pick a lot. Pick a couple behaviors, the less the better, that we want to change and focus in on. Let's say talking out, okay? Students always blurting out in class, talking out, and you just can't get that behavior change. So we're going to put that behavior on a paper with some points and some time frames attached to it. So every maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, every half hour, depending on how often it is, maybe just every hour. And we're going to track during the day that behavior. And we're going to show the student that they can earn points by not doing that behavior. And if they do that behavior, then they don't earn points. So it's kind of a positive thing. We don't want it to be, consequences where they're losing points, you could do it that way. And sometimes with kids, it works better that way, depending on the kid. But again, we want them to earn something from it. We want them to not only, positive behavior, but respect. And yep, sometimes we put a little trinket or a little reward at it if they hit a certain mark, a certain point, maybe for the day or for the week, depending on how often we want to see this behavior change or how quickly. So again, that point sheet is an awesome thing to do. Part of that point sheet too that I have really liked doing lately is choice surveys with students, where we sit down and there's some scripted questions, about 30 probably, where we go through different scenarios with kids to try to hone in on what is it that they're going to work for. Is it, is it food related or candy or, chips or a snack? And that's not a reward, folks. It is, but it's based on them changing their behavior. They get this if they do this. And that's what we want them to do. Is it, adult attention that they're craving? Do they want to spend some extra time with an adult? We go through these questions. Would you rather get an A on your paper or take the trash outside for the custodian? And you keep going over these questions over and over and over again. And what it does is start to rise to the top which type of reinforcement they like to have. So then we can use that reinforcement because it's what the kid wants and focus in on changing behavior. So I really like that choice survey for kids and getting to the bottom of what it is they'll work for and what's going to help change their behavior. Another strategy as a building level that has really taken off for Central Noble Primary is zones of regulation. We brought this into the building about a year ago, maybe even a year and a half ago. And it all stems from the Inside Out movie about the feelings and emotions, the different ones. There's rage and anger and anxiety and happy and joy. And we kind of focus in on 4 zones, and they're attached to a color, like obviously dysregulation or anger is red. Joy and regulation is green. There's yellow, where you're kind of on the fence. Blue is sad or upset. And the teachers and the kids have just taken to it to where everybody's talking about it. Everybody uses it. When a kid's maybe dysregulated, we talk to them about what zone are you in right now and why are you in that zone and how can we get you from red to green or even red to yellow, because sometimes that in itself is a big move. But that whole zones of regulations has really taken off. We've got lanyards that have those zones on them. We have posters around the building with those zones on it, and kids know it, teachers know it. Even some of our parents that are in volunteering in the building know it, our cafeteria, our support staff. We're really focused on that. And like I said, it became a school-wide focus, common language among all students and staff. And, again, it kind of started from the Inside Out movie, which was cool because kids can relate to that. And we even use those characters to help define the zones. So I really like the zones of regulation. Again, we didn't come up with that. I'm not going to take credit for that. I wish I did. I'd be writing books and making tours and speeches and things like that. But it's a definite positive use of communication tools and for kids to kind of advocate for themselves of where they're at, what's wrong with them today or what's going well, and how we can move from one zone to the other. I really, really like that. And the kids really seem to like it too. So we focused a little bit on behavior now. Let's talk about restoring behavior and restorative practices. And, it's a buzzword. There's so many buzzwords in education. So, we'll throw out restorative practices as our buzzword of the day. It's become one of those fancy words in education. It's been around for the last few years. But when it's done right and when it's done well, it can be super powerful to help transform not only students, but your building and the culture in your building. When a student has broken the circle, we'll call it either maybe the circle of trust or the circle of friendship or the circle of the student-teacher relationship. They've made some choices and they've broken that circle. How do we connect the circle back? How do we fill in the circle? How do we fix it? How do we get it to come back together? Restorative means just what it means, repairing relationships, not avoiding accountability, though. There still has to be that sense of accountability. Call it consequence, whatever you want to call it. But again, it's really about repairing the relationship or whatever was broken by the student. Again, that circle that got broken. One easy thing that I do, especially at the primary level, because, we can consequence kids, and we do consequence kids, but at my level, I don't always feel like consequence fixes the behavior. I mean, we want kids to understand when you make a choice, there's a consequence, both good and bad. We talk about that all the time. And so if you make a good choice, something positive is going to happen. So a good consequence. But if you make a bad choice, a negative consequence is going to come with that. You got to pay the price, unfortunately, sometimes. But we want our students to be able to fix the circle. So something simple like apologizing, maybe a public apology in front of the class to the teacher if the student has been disrespectful to the teacher. Or a lot of times I'll call the victim and the aggressor, or whatever you want to call it, the bully, out into the hallway to have a conversation with the three of us where the student who has done the other student wrong apologizes. And we go beyond saying, I'm sorry, because those are just words. And if we don't say them with some meaning and put some more backbone to it, what are we sorry for? It really doesn't mean anything then. So, getting the kids to understand that this is how we as adults handle situations that go wrong. We want them to know at an early age how to fix things, how to fix that circle. So again, just apologizing and taking ownership of their mistake is so huge at this level. There's been failures in my life when these kind of things happen of how to deal with students. I can remember having a student that was very upset, very dysregulated at the middle school level in my office, trying to give him some downtime, some reflection time, refocus time, restart, whatever. And I, went in to check on him, and I can't remember what I said, but I said something that just was not the right thing to say. And it fired that student right back up to where he looked straight at me and scowled and screamed, F you. And I'll never forget that, because I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? How did I go from getting this kid to almost be regulated to my words that I didn't even mean to say, whatever those words were? Like I said, I can't even really remember. I wish I could, because it probably wasn't really anything major. I think I might have smarted off a little bit or tried to use some sarcasm to redirect, and it backfired, and that's what I got. And I can remember kind of sarcastically saying, well, now you're going to have to go home. And, at the end of the day, maybe that's what the student wanted. Middle school is a whole other entity and issue. And yeah, if you've not spent some time with some middle school kids, especially nowadays with 6, 7, and 41 and all the things, middle school is hard. Maddie just spent some time last week substituting in middle school science, and she said, if I was going to be a teacher, this would have broken me today, I think. It was kind of fun to listen to her, because I've been there. I've seen it. I was a middle school principal for 3 years, and I loved that age group. The kids were awesome because you could have genuine, authentic conversations with them. But at the same time, you could have a kid saying F you on a daily basis to you and not even know why he's saying that or what it means even. And that was the frustrating part for me. Like, I couldn't fix a lot of those kids, and I'm a fixer. That's, one of my probably issues that I have to deal with sometimes is I always want to fix things and I want everybody to be happy. But at the end of the day, when this kid is yelling and really ticked off saying, F you, Mr. T, I couldn't fix that. And, that kid and I had a good relationship, and it was still okay after that, but he was so dysregulated in the moment. There was nothing that I could say or do that was going to calm him down. So at some point, you just have to send him home and get the parents involved, try a restart the next day, or maybe a couple days out of the building if you need to. And so I don't know that that was a failure on my part. I mean, obviously me setting him off using sarcasm was not a great thing. And, you learn from those mistakes, but it didn't obviously go as planned as I thought it would. And so you have to kind of take away from that. It's not always about the circle. It's about the connection that comes after the circle. So think about that for a minute. Just let that kind of gel there. It's not about the circle. It's about the connection that comes after the circle, or maybe even with the circle. Like I said, when that circle gets broken, how are we going to fix it? So now, as we move along this episode of kids and relationships and behaviors and fixing behaviors and maybe not fixing behaviors sometimes, I'll talk a little bit about some kids that have stood out in my memories through the years. And I won't name specific names to protect the innocent or the guilty. But, let's talk about a student who challenged me. I can remember I had both at the elementary level and at the middle school level I had ED classrooms, emotional disability students in my buildings, where they had separate classrooms for those students. They weren't housed there all day long like a jail or anything, but that room was there for their support. They had staff in place to help support their emotions and their disability. We wanted them out in the building in the gen ed classrooms as much as we could, but at the same time, when they got dysregulated, we had strategies and staff and places for them to go and put into place to help them cope with things. So I can remember an elementary ED student who, during state testing time, was just not having it. He was dysregulated, I would say. Like, he was ticked off, but he wasn't screaming. He wasn't yelling. He was just mad, and you were not going to get him to do anything, in particular, that state test. So the teacher had set him down to my office where I could proctor him just one-on-one. Hey, let's get you out of the situation, find a nice quiet place for you to work on this test. And the sad thing was, this kid was smart. He could have aced this state test with his hands and eyes shut and closed and bound behind him. But he wasn't having it that day. He was not going to do this test. And so I had made this nice little desk area in front of my desk where I could watch him and I could probably still get some work done and I could encourage him. And he was going to, I knew he was going to rock this test and he was going to do it for me. I just needed to get him out of the situation he was in and find a good place for him. Brought him down, set him down in front of my desk. This is when we were still doing paper and pencil versions of the state test. And I said, okay, buddy, let's go. I'm starting the timer now. You can go ahead and get started. Had his nice number 2 pencils freshly sharpened there in front of him. And he looked up at me, did not say a word, took that test in both of his hands and ripped it down the side. And just put it on his desk. Pretty much just ripped it up into parts and pieces, and there it lay. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say or what to do or how to fix the problem. So, it was pretty much a test that I couldn't count, and we documented that with the state, and he didn't take the test. He won, and it was okay. Honestly, what am I going to do? Get him another test, force him to do this test that he obviously didn't want to do. So we just, documented it. He didn't do the test, and it kind of counted against him in the school. But at the end of the day, he wasn't going to do well on it anyway because he didn't want to do it. So why fight it? So that was a challenging moment in my career of dealing with an emotional disability student who taught me a thing or two, like, you're not going to make me take this test. Thinking about a student that I didn't have a good read or understanding on, much like that student, there was a student who, at the middle school level, just continually made bad choices. Anything from just talking back to teachers, cutting class, not coming to school, huge disrespect. One-on-one, you could have conversations with him again that you thought you were getting through to him, but yet behaviors just never seemed to change. He just kind of always went back to that cycle. And it was about that same time where, being trauma informed and learning about ACEs with students, adverse childhood experiences, was coming on board. And so I was reading about being trauma informed, reading about ACEs, and as I read those 10 questions of the ACEs scale, if you've ever read it, I've actually mentioned it on a previous episode before, a trauma informed episode. Those questions, as I started to go through those, this student continually came up in my head. Like, if you answer yes to these questions, the more you answer yes to, the more trauma you've been exposed to, the more it's the reason why kids act out, basically. I just kept thinking of him. I was like, he's had that. He's had a parent in jail. He's been abused. He's, not been told that he's been loved. Just all these different things that are part of that ACEs scale, like over and over. And I bet he had at least 5 out of the 10, maybe 6 out of the 10 that I knew yes to the questions. There might have been more if I would have asked him directly. And it was kind of that aha moment of, oh my gosh, we have kids all around us that are from trauma. And we kind of know that, but we don't understand. We don't attribute that back to the behaviors and the circles that they break. And that was that light bulb moment for me where I'm like, my gosh, I misread this kid. Or maybe just didn't read the kid at all. I didn't think about the trauma that he has gone through as a kid, as a child, as his brain is developing, and what that has done to him and his decision-making process. He doesn't know why he's doing what he's doing. He's just doing it. And a lot of it is reacting from that trauma experiences that he's had. And that's something that Mr. T can't fix. Those are things that you need to get therapy and counselors and everything involved to support these young students who have gone through this trauma. And you can never erase that trauma. That's the sad thing. I mean, they're always going to have that. But if we can help them cope and deal with it and maybe get through it a little bit better, and if we can identify it for them and with them and have an idea of this is where they're coming from, this is their background, at least we'll know, and we can help them through that and maybe have a better understanding of the why that they're acting or the way they are doing the things that they're doing. So that was an aha moment for me for misreading or misunderstanding a student and not attributing the trauma that they've gone through to the decisions that they're making on a daily basis. A student who reminded me of why relationships matter. Well, I don't know that I've got just one, because to me, again, as I said at the beginning of this episode, relationships are so important to me. I feel like I do my best to make some connection with every single kid in my building, every classroom. When I was a teacher, it was easy because I just had, those 23, 24, 25 kids to connect with. But even then, across a grade level, I would make connections, or looking at the kids coming up in fourth grade that were going to be my fifth graders next year. I was trying to make connections with them during the school year already to make it more successful the next year. I didn't know that they were going to be in my classrooms or not, but I mean, I love joking with kids, picking at kids, teasing kids, trying to, talk their talk and talk their lingo and just make myself look like an idiot basically on purpose so that I can get a smile or a grin or an eye roll from them, because that to me is the start of the relationship. That's the connection that I have with them. Mr. T's a fun guy, and when I'm not fun, they know it because I'm always usually with a smile on my face and a laugh and a story, whatever. And that's where those connections and relationships for me come. So like I said, there's not really one kid that stands out to me that relationships matter. There's kids that I had as fifth grade students that I still connect with today, whether it's on Facebook or text messages or social media in general. Sometimes I still have lunch with kids that, now they're adults, obviously. And those are kind of weird, but fun times, because it's like, now I can be a little more open. We'll just leave it at that. A little more honest. They can kind of see the real Mr. T sometimes that they couldn't see as a fifth grader, or they couldn't see as, the student sitting in the principal's office maybe. But it's those kids too, in particular, that are sometimes the best to talk to, because it's just funny. Like I've got one student, like I said, that was a former student of mine when I was principal, and his son is a kindergarten student in my building now. And I've told this story a couple times, and I even told the dad, I'm like, do you remember when you were in my office and you had done something wrong and I was calling your dad because you were laughing when I was disciplined? You were laughing at me. And that was so disrespectful. And when I got his dad on the phone, I was like, your son he's laughing at me as I'm trying to tell him he's in trouble and he's going to be in a consequence. And blah, 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 blah. And his dad just on the phone kind of chuckled. He goes, Mr. T, that's just him. When he gets in trouble, he gets nervous and he'll laugh. He goes, he's laughing at me 2 seconds before he's getting a whooping. And so that moment has stuck with me forever. And now that he's back as a parent in my building, I kind of remind him of it all the time. Like car rider line comes through, I'm like, hey, don't be chuckling in the principal's office, man. It's going to make me mad. And we got through it and we worked through it as a family. And it's so fun that now he's back and I can kind of tease him about it. And the cool thing is his son is so nice and respectful. And not that dad wasn't. He had just made a mistake. He was a typical kid that we all make mistakes. Mr. T made mistakes lots of times. Sometimes he got caught, sometimes he didn't. Another episode. But, at the end of the day, we all make mistakes and we all figure it out. And again, that's where this whole episode, I guess, is spiraling around. Again, fixing those circles that we break. Again, students small and large, big and small, I try to build relationships with them. Some are more short-term relationships. Some are more long-term, and that's just the nature of the beast. It's not about favoritism or things like that, but some kids you just have different relationships and different bonds with, and some of them last longer than others. So keep working on the relationships. All right. We have the word detention in this podcast title, interventions and detentions. And so let's talk about consequences and punishments and maybe even just the detention dilemma for just a moment here, because I'll admit I've used detention before with kids, mostly more at the upper elementary, definitely middle school level. I can remember there was a time when I was at the middle school that my detentions were longer than the high school detentions. Like we did an hour, baby, and we did them on Friday nights. You were not going to leave that building if you made a bad choice during the week on a Friday. You're going to spend it with Mr. T, and we're down in the library, far away from everybody. You're going to work on work, and it's quiet in here. And guess what? There was always one or two or three or four repeat offenders every week. Same kid, same choices, same consequence. It didn't change behavior. Some kids it did. Like, you could have a kid, for me, probably one time in a detention like that, because my mom and dad would have also helped motivate me in their own way to not make those choices again. I wouldn't have gone back. But, it makes me wonder sometimes, did kids love the attention of detention? It was their safe place maybe, but we had a lot of kids that just continued to make choices, and the detention itself didn't change the behavior. So I don't know how effective detentions are. I do not use them as a primary principle. I don't think I've ever put a kid in detention after school. Now, have I done lunch detention, or call it, office lunch, things like that? Yeah, I do that. Have I taken recess away? Absolutely. Do I like taking recess away? No, especially not at the primary level, because I feel like the kids need that outlet. So sometimes we'll make them, walk laps outside, or, do something a little more structured where they're still getting outdoors, they're still exercising. But I hate taking away recess is a last resort, because a kid misses recess and then I put him back in class. Oh, that's not going to be good for the teacher or anybody else either. So I don't like doing that. I'll still use it. It's in my bucket or my bucket of tricks, but it's a tough one. Consequences are needed. We get that. I don't dismiss the need for consequences, but I think the need is different at every grade level, every age level. And they need to fit the crime. Again, they need to help that student restore what they broke. So a lot of times, if a kid made a mess on a bus, I have them clean the bus with parents' consent, of course, and we don't get out harsh chemicals and things like that. But, they might sweep the bus, or they might wipe the seats down with a wet rag. Same thing in the bathroom. They make a mess in the bathroom, they clean it up. They make a mess in the cafeteria, they clean it up. I don't think a detention is going to fix that behavior. I think the consequence of, I don't really want to clean up my mess or somebody else's that I didn't make, I think that can change the behavior quicker than anything. Obviously, for me, having the student call a parent after they have made a mistake is huge. They do not want to make that phone call. They don't think about that in the moment of making a decision, but when they get in trouble and they have to come see Mr. T, one of the things we do is call home, and they have to get on the phone and they have to tell mom and dad why they're in my office, why they're calling, and what the consequence is. And that's a tough phone call to make. Usually I'll warn kids first a couple of times, like, you don't want to have to call mom and dad if you do this again. Because we do talk a lot, because I want them to learn from their mistakes. But if they make that same mistake again, consequences are going to follow with it. But again, we use loss of recess. We do the phone calls home. Apologies, like I said, having students go to the person that they did wrong and try to fix it. Genuinely try to explain what they did wrong and why they're sorry and how it won't happen again. Do I send kids home? Absolutely. Even at the kindergarten, first grade level. If a kid puts a hand on another kid or a teacher, they're going home. That's unacceptable. And I want them to understand that. And I want parents to understand that. We don't do that. If I do that as an adult, I go to jail. I get charges pressed against me. And we talk to students about that. And I know that's a hard concept for kindergarten students to figure out, but we don't want them doing things like that. And they go home. If they're causing a safety issue for them or for others, they're going to go home, plain and simple. That doesn't happen often in our building, but it does, and it's an effective strategy most of the time. If detention worked, why would we keep seeing those same students in it every week? I don't know. I'm glad I don't do detention right now. I think I might have done even a Saturday school or two. A high school did it back in the day. I don't know if ours does it now. I don't think so. But sometimes, those detentions, those after-school detentions on Friday nights when I'm supposed to be home, or Saturday morning watching cartoons and I'm in the building watching kids, I'm not sure if the punishment is more on Mr. T at that point or the kid. You think about that for a minute. Then there's the quiet kids. That was not Mr. T, that's for sure. How easy is it to overlook those students sometimes that just don't demand your attention? I talk about that a lot. Like, I never see this kid in the office. they're always doing what they're supposed to do, or they're so quiet. Like, I didn't even know they were still in this building, or I didn't know, do you still go here? I didn't know that. I thought you moved last week because I don't ever see you. You're never around. One thing that we want to think about too is, as much as we focus on the kids that make poor choices, we need to focus on these kids too and come up with strategies to make sure that they're seen, they're heard, whether it's, personal notes, those conversations, intentional praise. Don't just dismiss them, because they need to be recognized too. It's so important, because those are the kids that can kind of get lost in the crowd. And at some point, even though they're good kids, they may end up actually being bad kids for not getting some of that recognition of just doing the right thing every day and going unseen for doing it. I'll think of a middle school kid here that I had, who just went with the flow, was super quiet, he didn't talk unless you talked to him. And once you talked to him and started asking him some questions, he would definitely open up. Super intellectual, very knowledgeable. He was a big reader. Like, he would read big books. Now he owns his own construction business, I believe, after graduating high school. But he was one of those kids that he never spoke. He never caused any problems. He just kept to himself. But again, if you made the first move, he wasn't going to come just start talking to you about, hey, someday I want to open my own construction business. But if you opened that door and said, hey, QR, those are his initials, what do you want to be when you grow up? Let me hear what you're thinking about. He would have told me everything and been passionate and excited about it. But if he didn't get that invite, he would have never shared that stuff with me or with anyone else. So those are the kids that you can't dismiss them just because they're the quiet kid. You have to think about it, and you have to challenge them too. And here's a challenge for you. I want you, if you're a teacher, person that works in the building, staff member, administrator, whatever, this next week, notice one kid who never causes a problem and make sure that they know that you saw them. Give them some kind of praise, give them some kind of acknowledgement. Pick out that kid. I'm going to do the same. That kid that's quiet, that doesn't cause any problems, and let them know that you are aware of them and you see them and you hear them even when they're quiet. Let them know that. Well, folks, we are closing in on the end of this episode, and I'm not even sure that I answered any questions, but I did talk a whole lot. And we're at my favorite part, rapid fire question time. Yes, I even do rapid fire questions to myself. So here we go. What's one phrase that I find myself saying to kids every day? Lately, it's this, and I've kind of stole this from the intranet. But when a kid is in my office, or I have to go pull them out of a classroom to talk to them, to get them refocused, this is what I've been asking them lately. Is this something that you can fix, or do we need to make a phone call home? And it's amazing that every kid usually says, I can fix this, Mr. T, because they don't want to make that phone call home. So I love that. It's kind of putting it in their ballpark. They figured out. And I've had some kids that weren't able to fix it. Within an hour, they've done something again, and then we make that phone call home. One thing that I try not to ask kids anymore, but I catch myself doing it, is, why did you do that? Why did you do that? They don't know why they did it. They don't have that brain capacity at 6, 7, 8 years old, sometimes not even at 12, 13 years old. They don't know why they did it. They just did it, Brad. Don't ask them why. They don't know. I don't know sometimes as an adult why I did what I did. Why did I keep picking at Sherry? Because it was fun. And what did I get in return? A mad Sherry. Shout out to Sherry. She don't like to be picked on. So stop it, Brad. Don't ask yourself, why did you do that? Just don't do it. Same thing for kids. Just don't do it. But definitely don't ask them why. They're not going to be able to tell you. Usually I'll get a shrug of the shoulders and I'm like, yep, that's a valid answer, buddy. You didn't know why you did what you did, but don't ask them why. Just say, can you fix it? Can you fix it? And they can usually fix it. We've talked about this 100 times, but it keeps coming back up. So we'll just say coffee or energy drink before the morning duty for me. Oh, lately it's been both. First, I start out with a Bloom energy drink on the way to school. So shout out to Bloom. Best energy drinks ever. People either love them or hate them. I love the ingredients in them. There's like apple cider vinegar. There's prebiotics, low sugar. The flavors I wasn't super excited about, but they're actually good. They're not super sweet. Just enough punch to get you through the morning. And then you follow it up with that hot cup of coffee when you're at school to get your day going. You are golden. It's my go-to combo right now. So I'm going to say both. Energy drink first, followed by some coffee. The hardest behavior I've had to deal with, Like I said before, it really depends on the age, the level that we're talking about. But when I was an intermediate principal, middle school principal, I had middle school, I had alcohol in the building that was being passed around from 4 kids that ended up getting expelled and in school suspension, things like that. In the intermediate elementary, where I was third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade principal, I had sixth graders passing around vapes that tested positive for THC. So that's big. You've got third graders in the building with sixth graders that are passing these vapes around from locker to locker and smoking them on the playground in front of Mr. T when he has recess duty. How bad did I feel knowing that kids were doing this on my watch, feet from me, yards from me, and I didn't see it? It's amazing how these kids can hide the vapes and sneak them around and use them in front of you. And they had marijuana in it. Thank God we had a SRO that could test those things. Video footage, we caught them, we dealt with them, but that was probably the biggest thing to deal with. One thing it's not hard to deal with, but you don't want to have to deal with it. And we've dealt with it as low as second grade for me. And that's being one-to-one with iPads and those going home because of, making up snow days and virtual learning days. We've had kids as low as second grade taking inappropriate pictures of themselves or others on their iPads. And we find out about it because they show people. And when they show people, those people come tell us about it. But that's super scary because I don't know what their intent is. Is it just to show their friends? Is it somebody's asking for them? And we got to get parents involved at that point and take the technology away from the students. And it's just scary because where did they learn this? Where did they figure this out? Who is prompting them to do it? If there is, it's just a mess. And it scares me as a principal to know that we've got kids with electronics, whether it's school provided or personally provided, that are doing things that are crossing the lines of, just being appropriate. I don't like it. Scary. So that's hard to deal with. Easiest way to connect with kids. Well, I referred to this before too, but talk to them, joke with them, but be genuine. The joking has to still be genuine. They got to know that you're truly vested into having fun with them, poking at them, but also knowing about them. Be genuine. That's the best thing that I can tell you to do. One word to describe how this school year feels so far, I'd say solid. Now, we're in a lot of uncertainty as a school corporation right now because we did pass a referendum. We're looking at some strategies to help not only cut costs, but bring students into the building, looking at the possibility of trying to wage the state into letting us do a 4-day school week next year that could really make some positive changes for us. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but I feel like we're solid. I feel like teachers have stepped up and we're owning where we're at and what we need to do and trying to do everything as a unified team to make it work. So I'm going to say solid. We solid right now. Not everybody else would maybe feel that way, but that's how Mr. T feels in his rose-colored glasses. A kid quote that I'll never forget. I've had this told to me a couple times, and I guess it's a good thing, but I hug kids. I don't care. I do the side hug just to protect myself. But I try, if a kid wants a hug, they're going to get a hug from Mr. T. And one thing that I hear quite often from both boys and girls is, "You smell good," or "You smell like my dad." And, I guess that's a good thing because I try to be fresh and showered every morning for school. So maybe it's my laundry detergent, maybe it's my soap, maybe, every once in a while I'll throw a spray of cologne on or something. But I guess there could be worse things. They could say, "You stink, Mr. T." And Mr. T has been stinky sometimes. So thank goodness they're not referring to that. So last rapid fire question, the detention song of the day. What's playing in your head when you walk into detention with your students? The first song that came to mind was Bad Reputation by Joan Jett. Great song. Kind of sums up the kids and why they might be in there. Don't give a about my bad reputation. So sing it, Joan. And that's what I hear walking into detention, even though I don't do detention anymore. Thank goodness. So looking back over this episode, at the end of the day, it's relationships that drive behavior change. Focus on those relationships, build those relationships, and you'll change behaviors in kids one kid at a time. I'd love to hear from you listeners on our social media posts. I'm going to post out on Facebook, Insta, TikTok, LinkedIn, X. When I post these episodes, especially this one, let's hear what kids have changed you. What stories have you gone through with kids and relationships that have driven change? Maybe there's future episode subjects that you want to share. Throw that in there too. I want your feedback. That's what's going to drive interventions and detentions. I've got some really cool episodes coming up. I'm super excited. We've got Andrew Brand from Lakeland Intermediate School on the horizon. And it might even come out before this episode. It depends on when I'm recording, to be honest with you. One episode I'm really excited about, reaching out to a listener, Charles Grady, who is a teacher at West Noble High School. He teaches an intro to teaching class. He uses the podcast with his kids at times. We're going to do a podcast with his kids as part of one of his class sessions coming up. That is going to be so cool. I'm super excited. It's probably going to bump up to my favorite episode really, really quickly. So we still got Justine Gonzalez on the horizon, talking about culture and learning and all the stuff. We got Dave Nagel on the horizon talking about grading and reporting. So we've got some great episodes coming up. But again, when you have an episode on your mind or something you want Brad to talk about, hit me up with it. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. I thrive on your feedback, and that's the only way that I get better and maybe help meet your needs through this podcast. So send them my way. We'd love to hear from you listeners. So to wrap it up, at the end of the day, behavior isn't a battle to win. It's a story to understand. And with that, tune in again next week with another Interventions and Detention episode. I am Brad, your host with the most some days. Tune in again, folks. It's great to see you and hear you, and check us out on all the social media, all the platforms for your podcasting where you can find us. Just look up Interventions and Detentions and we'll be there. All right, it's that time. Tune in again, and don't forget, Interventions and Detentions. It's where the real learning begins. See you next time.